Japanese high school student Rizuki Kakoyama had just gotten into his dream university when Truck-kun sent him flying into another world. The young man was then reincarnated into a farmer's family, poor as dirt. Instead of being a rich noble, it seems Truck-kun really held a grudge against the guy. Not only was his family poor, but he was also bullied for his distinctly Asian black hair, a rarity in this world. Luckily for our boy, a glimmer of hope appeared when the system notification popped up, making him feel like his life was finally about to change. But that hope was also shattered when the system straight up called him a ragged loser. His chances were gone. Now he had no choice but to work his butt off to pay his family's debt. Our little guy thought he was going to shine like a legendary hero reborn or a powerful knight. And then one day that dream came true when he ran into a grizzly bear. Ian and his sister's lives were saved by a mage who vaporized the chubby bear. He didn't understand what such a powerful mage was doing in this remote village, but the woman piqued his curiosity when she said she'd received a prophecy to find and raise a black-haired boy. Knowing this kid matched the description she was looking for, she became interested in Ian while the boy was still wondering how the hell she could take down that giant bear in a single blow. Anyone can become a mage. That thought sparked hope in Ian, making him dream that one day he too could use magic. The kind woman assured him that he, despite being a poor peasant, could change his destiny and become a mage. She even offered to teach him magic, and the boy finally realized he could turn his trashy fate around if he accepted the deal. The mage took her new student into a small study room, and immediately Ian faced his first formidable opponent, a thick textbook containing the absolute fundamentals of magic titled Moronius A. And by the way, the mage had personally gone to his house to ask for his parents' and the city lord's permission just to ensure there would be no trouble later. With everyone's great expectations, Ian was ready to give it his all. "I've prepared your first lesson." Meanwhile, the kid's system slowly recorded his progress level each time he turned a page of the book. Moronius reached a completion rate of 27%. Along with a few other thick books and countless weird Harry Potter-style spells after that, the kid finally hit the 99% completion mark. Moronius was fully completed thanks to that. The boy could now wield the language of magic perfectly and fully understood how mages used it. A full 7 years passed. That's right, all that time flew by just for his studies. And yet somehow this hot mage still looked exactly the same. She believed their private tutoring was now coming to an end as Ian had clearly matured. It was time for them to start a new chapter together. The boy's only current skills were fluency in the language of magic and the ability to manipulate it. In the next scene, we admire the mesmerizing mountains under a peaceful sky. And beneath this beautiful horizon, Ian is getting a taste of torture as he free falls from the sky. He screamed, complaining that his master was going too fast, but it was obvious his teacher was thoroughly enjoying it. The young man, trembling in fear, expressed that. For the past 6 years, all he'd learned was a single damn language, so he was hardly a real mage. His master watched him with amusement while the guy was crying his eyes out, begging for someone to save him. High up in the air, the beautiful mage urged him to try focusing on the voices around him while the guy thought to himself that this crazy woman must be schizophrenic, because who could hear voices in the middle of nowhere like this? The only sound he heard right now was the whistling of the wind. But strangely, when Ian focused intensely, he heard the whispers and chatter of entities. That seemed very impressed a human could fly. This surprised our boy, who wondered if this was the guiding voice of Moronius. After hearing those voices, the system announced he had unlocked a new skill called wind magic, allowing him to manipulate wind. I absolutely love how his first practical skill was basically turning into Superman. After that harsh training session, his master continued to tease and laugh at his pathetic state. Ian sarcastically replied that she only knew how to have fun at his expense. What she actually meant was to talk about the realm of mages, who borrow power from the mysteries of nature by truly communicating with them. That's how magic works in this world, which left the boy stunned. Those voices up there, the hot mage remarked, were actually the voices of the wind, and he would also need to listen to the voices of other mysteries as well. Ian now somewhat understood how magic worked and happily went along with this method. Pointing straight at him with a serious face, she gave him his second task, understand water magic. And just as you'd guess, the guy was thrown into the water, choking, and had to become Michael Phelps, or drown in the deep. He couldn't even communicate with the raging currents, struggling just to stay alive. Next, his teacher made him conquer ice magic, so he was thrown into an ice bath in the middle of a ball-shrinking Antarctica. At this point, His master was quite hopeful and very impressed with the kid's learning speed, while our boy, on the other hand, was having an existential crisis and struggling to keep up. Without hesitation, this fiery and insane mage snapped her fingers and summoned hellfire right in front of Ian. Our guy knew full well that right after freezing him solid, this woman was about to roast him alive. He begged his master to spare his life. But as always, the sound of the crackling flames piqued the young man's curiosity. The first question the flames uttered was whether they could have some fun. Scorch you, and you can imagine the kid's reaction because he knows he's about to be literally roasted. In the next scene, we enter the caves. The cave where Ian must achieve enlightenment in earth magic, his final mission so far. The voice of the earth is actually quite soothing, yet it spouts some cumbersome philosophies just like Master Oogway. And so even our boy is bewildered, not understanding what the heck he just heard, making him wonder if he lacks the ability to comprehend or understand earth magic. The young man takes it as a sign of relief and leaves the area when suddenly the system displays another notification telling him he just received bonus skill points. These points can help him increase his proficiency in his available magic. 100 points are available right now. This practically confirms to Ian that he's definitely a cheater in this world, because how else would he get this stuff for free? Obviously, since Earth is the element he's lacking, he decides to upgrade it by touching the screen. As soon as he touches it, a dazzling blue light flashes. Just then, the voice of the Earth commands him, warning that lava lies just below, and if he's not careful, an earthquake could occur and cause the lava to erupt to the surface. Now Ian understands what that voice was trying to convey. His goal now is to get the hell out of here and confirm with his master that he heard the voice of the mystery. First, Ian summons a flame to create light to find his way. This time, another voice shrieks in pain, expressing its rage at the light. Ian tries to talk to it, asking if this is also the voice of the earth. However, this element is different. It's not one his master ever told him about because, you see, the only thing that truly hates the light is the voice of shadow. And that is this mystery. Ian is startled and shocked while outside his master is reviewing her schedule. Realizing she might have to attend an upcoming fire sorcerer convention, her disciple comes running out frantically. She congratulates Ian on his final success. Meanwhile, he shares another interesting piece of news he connected with the shadows of darkness. This revelation truly makes the sorceress gasp in astonishment, as she clearly didn't expect it. For him to connect with the power of shadow, it makes her wonder if he really encountered such a cowardly mystery. And her silence makes Ian worried. She turns to her student and says they need to go down the mountain. The boy happily obliges, curious about where their next adventure will be. But it seems Ian has misunderstood her because, you see, his master was talking about something completely different. She declares that from this day forward they will officially go their separate ways. Pointing to the left, she advises him to go to Chronolix, where he will soon attend the Space-Time Sorcerer Convention, because if he is fated to learn that art, then he'll also have the good fortune of stumbling upon a talented space-time sorcerer there. The young man is bewildered at being suddenly told to go learn something completely new related to space-time. Seeing his confused look amuses her. Eels reflects that this kid was born with a natural talent for uncovering mysteries, and according to her intuition, she can guess that he'll also be capable of using space-time powers. With that advice, their time together comes to a close. Ellis is excited to meet him again in 3 years in Draham. In the next scene, we are introduced to the area she just told him about. This town looks quite rustic, and though people are bustling about, Ian is still preoccupied with finding the convention his master mentioned. He still thinks that woman is truly unpredictable for sending him here. A man in the crowd who seems to be a tour guide is ready to help anyone who wants to head north. Ian recalls his master's words that the convention would be held in the north. And since he's free, our boy thinks this is a good opportunity to set off immediately. The scene changes and we see a group of people setting up camp to rest. Among them, Ian is also resting. One of the men is the one who called out earlier. He is Lick, the head of the Merchants Guild. He asks if this is the kid's first time heading north, and Ian confirms that he's only going there for an urgent matter. Hearing this, the older man comments that the boy probably knows nothing about Dragon Mountain. Ian seems confused because he's heard rumors that the place is filled with beautiful yet dangerous black drakes. These drakes are not easy to deal with at all. Lick acts friendly towards the kid and asks if he knows how to fight or run. Ian is not very comfortable with this guy, but he replies that he's not very confident. Immediately the guy, Lee, who seems so kind, does a 180 and calls our boy useless while also asking his profession. With a look of shame, the boy shares that he's a sorcerer. Something happens to Lick. The man trembles in shock and calls him Sir Sorcerer. Overhearing the conversation, a girl is drawn to the kid. The cloaked girl turns to see what's going on. Meanwhile, the other men are still bewildered, even astonished to learn this kid is a sorcerer. Ian really doesn't understand why these people are so stunned. His small revelation completely changed the atmosphere as if they now worship his abilities. Lick quickly becomes obsequious like a servant grabbing a bowl. He eagerly scoops more food for the kid. Even though Ian refuses, the man still rushes over to the food server to get him a new bowl. More and more people start to whisper about Ian's identity as a sorcerer. Some of them even doubt his abilities, believing his appearance makes him look like a third-rate weakling who's just talking. Now big. These haters refuse to respect our boy and think he has no talent while Ian is a good-natured kid and can't be bothered. The girl who noticed him earlier decides to strike up a conversation. She whispers that if he's really a sorcerer, he should try using some magic to show them who's boss. It sounds like a rather assertive and bold approach. However, Ian doesn't really understand what she means. The girl explains that mercenaries usually mock quiet people. They see them as shy or weak. That's why people like that need to display their power to intimidate those who doubt their abilities, because if Ian does that, you'll show them who's in charge and the mercenaries will automatically become your followers, ready to protect you from any trouble. This idea was a bit new to Ian. He understood what the girl meant but didn't know what he should do in this situation. Because first of all, this boy had never gotten angry with anyone before. While the conversation was happening, the food server sitting nearby spat into his plate. Ian then used a leaf to wipe it around. This disrespect really infuriated our boy. He couldn't believe this bastard actually dared to spit in his food. Suddenly, the ground trembled, making the server realize he had messed up. Ian approached that bastard with an overwhelming presence, roaring as he asked how he dared to spit on his plate like that. The server was so scared he pissed his pants. He quickly prostrated himself in terror and begged for forgiveness. He apologized to the master mage for his terrible actions, which made Ian even more furious. The server made an excuse claiming he just wanted to clean the plate. Ian was enraged by the guy's brilliant way of cleaning a plate, which was to spit on it first. The guy stubbornly argued that water itself is very dirty, so washing with it would be even worse. Ian truly didn't understand the logic behind that statement, so he questioned his logic. The server then explained in detail that water is actually full of mud and parasites, which is why he never washes plates with water. My God, that was the worst logic ever. This man genuinely believed that his saliva was cleaner. That statement was psychologically shocking to Ian. It haunted him for the rest of the night. The boy looked like he was about to go insane, completely frozen in front of the mercenaries and the servers because this medieval era had absolutely no concept of hygiene. Enraged, Ian coldly muttered an incantation, creating a surge of power from the nearby campfire. The flames shot up high over their heads, threatening everyone and surprising even the girl who had given him advice. Maintaining a firm stance, Ian ordered them to hurry up and bring some damn water over. He cursed them out, calling them a bunch of filthy medieval trash. Two men scrambled to get water, not even understanding what they had done wrong in the first place. In the next scene, we see a quiet night. It seems everyone has fallen asleep except for the mercenaries who are looking for Kathy, the girl who just went missing. One of them is a horny bastard. He wanted to take Kathy for himself because his medieval stick was acting up at 3 in the morning. Seeing her in the distance, the dog in heat called out to Kathy, urging her to come closer. He suddenly realized Kathy had actually been knocked unconscious. She had been kidnapped by a group of bandits. The mercenaries shouted towards the bandits, but their display of intimidation failed miserably when one of them was suddenly killed by an arrow through the chest. The mercenaries roared in fury as the attackers had killed one of their own comrades. They quickly sprang into action, determined to drive off and even kill all of these guys. The leader of this mysterious group saw them as nothing more than tiny insects, but at that moment Kathy actually woke up and started biting ferociously at the guy's back. He was forced to throw her down, not daring to risk getting his arm bitten off by her secret Goku biting technique. Kathy struggled to run away while the leader ordered his men to quickly chase after her. While all of this was going on, our boy was still sleeping in his tent, plagued by those same haunting memories, realizing that these medieval bastards actually used saliva to clean things. The commotion outside quickly woke him from his nightmare. A mysterious voice rang out, urging him to wake up quickly. Our guy sensed the killing intent in the surrounding atmosphere before he even heard the footsteps of the mercenaries running towards him. Lick was the first to arrive. He called out, "Master Mage," and frantically yelled that they were in big trouble. In the next scene, our boy rushes to the battle area where the mercenaries are fighting the bandits to the death. The leader is truly the strongest one. He swung his sword, cutting down the mercenaries with ease. He even ordered all his subordinates to kill without mercy and relentlessly search for the hiding woman. Kathy, their target, was now hiding behind a nearby tree. She cowered in absolute terror, not knowing what to do because with the way things were going, she would soon be caught. While she was hiding, one of the men approached and found her making her worst fears a reality. Holding his blade right to her face, the man threatened to chop off her arm if she didn't get up immediately. Terrified, Kathy fell into a desperate panic, certain that her life was about to end. Before she even had a chance to stand up, this heartless scum swung his sword to cut her down, but at that exact moment, an attack struck him with such force that the ground beneath him cracked from the impact. Kathy was stunned. Her savior was standing right behind him. Ian had cast a spell and appeared just in the nick of time. She looked up at him astonished as he took her hand and told her to stick close to him. His confidence helped calm her down. Meanwhile, the others also clung on, forming a small human train and hiding behind the master mage. It might have looked funny, but it was actually a formation because Ian was preparing to cast a spell. He shouted, "Open!" much like Sukuna's fire technique, but instead of flames, this boy gathered the power of darkness and lightning into an orb. The surrounding mercenaries, as well as the bandits, all took notice of this spell. And in the blink of an eye, the entire area was plunged into pitch-black darkness, where nothing could be seen. They anxiously raised their torches, but aside from those tiny points of light, nothing else was visible. They began bumping into each other in the darkness, as if there was a power outage, but while they were fumbling, Ian's train formation proved very useful for his group. He confidently led the way while they followed behind him, and by using this technique, that he believed they could easily escape. The skill he was using was a form of dark magic combined with his dark eye attribute, which allowed him to see everything clearly in the darkness. Unfortunately, a terrible coincidence occurred when one of the attackers happened to bump into Lick, causing trouble. The situation took a turn for the worse when that guy quickly swung his sword, trying to cut them down with the small opportunity he had. The man standing right in front of Nick, terrified out of his mind, begged for his life, pleading that he was just an old man. With no way to resist, Ian had to rush forward and cast his incinerate spell. Remember how he used it before just to light a torch? Well, not this time. Our boy actually made that flame completely engulf the guy's face, burning him alive. After being scorched into a piece of well-done steak, the guy collapsed to the ground, scaring the remaining bandits witless. The one they were up against was no amateur, and even Ian understood that this display of power was enough to make the others run for their lives. Just as he predicted, a sudden panic broke out. The bandits scrambled to flee, but their leader roared, refusing to let them escape and forcing them to charge. Despite Ian's confidence, nothing had really changed. Then a black dragon suddenly appeared, stunning him by biting the bandit leader's head clean off. It was a gruesome death that struck absolute terror into the hearts of the survivors. But that wasn't all. Even our boy was terrified, as the situation had become much more complicated with the appearance of this giant carnivorous beast. The vicious beast stared with curious amusement at the other humans, all while chomping down on their comrade like a predator that had just found a whole pack of delicious prey to devour. The remaining bandits fled in terror, but the horror also spread through Ian's group. Lich stammered, pointing a shaky finger to draw the mage's attention to the dragon. Despite his confidence as a mage, our boy had never faced a creature as powerful as this black dragon. Ian knew they were facing total annihilation, while the system commented that they were confronting one of the primordial mysteries. This automatically unlocked a skill for him. It was a new one called Summon, which allowed Ian to communicate with and summon other life forms. It seemed like a convenient ability considering his chances of victory against this colossal beast. But it also made our boy wonder if the beast before him was any different from the other mysteries he had encountered. They were all different elements, but if he could communicate with this creature, they might survive. Despite his hesitation, Ian decided to take the gamble and called out to the black dragon, which was glaring at him with blood dripping from the corner of its mouth. Lich and the others, I truly thought they were about to be sent to hell even with Ian protecting them. Meanwhile, the mage patiently stared back at the beast as it snarled, trying to intimidate the human. Gathering a little confidence in his abilities, Ian continued to communicate because he knew that so far, no mystery had ever dared to defy his efforts. The mage introduced himself, but in the cheesiest way imaginable. He said that he was the Black Dragon's friend. Yep, it seems he also learned Naruto's Talk no Jutsu during his 7-year journey. Anyway, the Black Dragon was confused, and so was his party. Ian literally put up a sign in his head to explain that friends shouldn't fight. But I think our boy forgot the fact that this monster had just been chewing on a fresh man. The creature snarled in response, making the others wonder what it was saying to the mage. Ian's face showed clear confidence, but the funny thing was he himself had no idea what this monster was trying to say, so he was just as clueless as everyone else right now. He had absolutely no way of communicating. So he spent all his remaining points to enhance the skill, dumping everything into the summoning stat for a chance to talk. After boosting his summoning stat, our boy finally understood the Black Dragon's language, giving him a chance to speak with it. Ian confirmed it once more to see if it was true by calling out to the Black Dragon, but his attempt only angered the beast, which roared in his face for wasting its time. Ian's group was scared out of their minds while he remained calm and chose his words carefully. To start the conversation, he first explained that he had no intention of fighting the monster, but the Black Dragon replied that it was foolish to even entertain the thought of fighting it. Ian assured it that he knew that, and that they would lose instantly if they tried to attack it. He was actually playing along with the Black Dragon's arrogance, acting as if fighting the great beast would only be a waste of their time. The prideful Black Dragon assumed these humans were begging for mercy. Lich and the others assumed they were actually having a conversation, while Kathy waited patiently for the Black Dragon to roar that it would indeed be pointless to bother killing the remaining weaklings. And that was exactly what our boy wanted. Ian started to think this negotiation was going in their favor. There was just one small problem. The beast roared that it was in an extremely bad mood right now, implying it had no intention of letting them go. Ian's group was on their knees begging for their lives while our boy wondered what to do next. Ian took it as a sign from the Black Dragon telling him to get lost, and he really had no other choice but to charge in and fight the beast head-on. But fighting wasn't his intention, because the mage suddenly turned into a therapist and asked the Black Dragon why it was in such a bad mood. Still angry, the beast roared that it had no reason to complain about it to a human. He replied that he wanted to offer a little help to soothe the Black Dragon's mood. His offer seemed arrogant to the creature. It thought a useless human could do nothing of significance. In response, the mage mumbled a series of words in the language of magic, causing water to rise and swirl all around. The sight looked strange to the group, and even stranger to the beast, as Ian enveloped himself in a mystical aura. Intrigued by this sudden display of magic, the beast was now completely interested in the young man. Ian stressed that he was nothing more than a humble mage trying to communicate with the mysteries of the world. That's why he just wanted to help the Black Dragon with everything he had. Seeing that the beast hadn't uttered any angry words, Ian knew he had this in the bag. The next step was when the real negotiation began. We cut to the next scene. Midnight falls and the Black Dragon's bloodlust is gone, and it became more open to talking. Our boy was just glad to have delayed immediate death for himself and his friends, but the real problem was meeting its demands. Ian weighed his options, understanding that the Black Drake held all the advantages here. This meant the mage had to be the one to make simple requests. A memory of his master suddenly came to his mind. She once told him that one cannot master magic, and if one doesn't master communication. That's also why building relationships with arcane beings was absolutely essential, whether they were friends or not. Each arcane being has its own nature, its own essence. A mage's job is to recognize and empathize with those natures, to go with the heart of these arcane beings. In other words, Ian realized that interpersonal skill was a mage's ultimate survival tool, especially in a life-or-death situation like this. He had the perfect opportunity to prove he could coax a drake out of its bloodlust. To achieve this goal, and he first pulled up his skill window. The system displayed a skill called Master of Summon Management, which was basically everything our boy needed for his current problem. Normally, this would seem like the fastest option, but the kid slowly considered it and found it rather strange. The skill required him to give the drake a fine wine, and the more Ian read the notes from this damn system, the more he sweated bullets. Because the next step required him to profusely flatter the arcane entities he was communicating with. In short, the most useful advice this young man got from the system was to just use alcohol and turn into one of those simp lords who fawns over hot girls on Twitter. Ian helplessly gave in, realizing that this kind of mission was impossible for a loner like him. Meanwhile, even the drake was wondering what the hell this guy was planning. The kid strengthened his resolve. He thought he should start by trying to reach the creature's heart, because that was the only way to make any kind of progress. Ian called out to the drake, expressing that he had prepared a wonderful gift for the great beast. Curious about the gift, the beast demanded he bring it out immediately. Next, Ian called out to Nick, who jumped at the sudden command. The young man quickly told the old man to bring out the strongest liquor they had right now. A moment later, the man returned with a box of the most exquisite and high-end-looking liquor, presenting it to the drake. The monster didn't quite understand the purpose of this gift. Even Ian was suppressing his frustration at how ungrateful the monster was, but on the outside he remained cool and explained that this was a gift that was very precious in the human world. Pouring the beast a huge glass, he handed it over. At first, the drake sniffed it, noticing a rather strange scent. The beast erupted in fury, questioning if this human was trying to pull some 3,000 IQ assassination trick to betray it. Ian's group was terrified, but there was no trick here. To prove his words, the young man downed the whole cup with ease. Even his own group was a little shocked that he just went and did all that. Ian waved his hand as if it were nothing, but inwardly he was dizzy because the liquor was so strong. The drake was a bit annoyed because the smell was quite bad, so it held its nose to avoid the smell. The mage assured it that it would feel better if it just tried a sip. The monster stared at the glass. That tiny cup would surely be nothing to it. Ready to proceed, it stuck out its tongue for a small taste while Ian's group prayed for their safety. Suddenly, the drake started writhing like a little girl. He clearly hadn't expected such an outcome. And although it found the taste unpleasant for a beast like itself, the liquid was addictive. Catching that perfect signal, Ian lured the beast into trying other kinds as well. And so the night passed and the creature got dead drunk from chugging so much alcohol. The drake was in a mood, feeling euphoric, and had found a new passion for alcohol. But our boy was wondering how the hell this bastard was still alive after downing 7 whole barrels. Ian and the drake had become best buddies. They both realized just how monstrous the beast's alcohol tolerance was. Previously, our young man had planned to escape while the giant lizard was fast asleep, but that was far from becoming a reality. Instead, Ian was chugging the liquor himself when the drake suddenly called the mage's name. Since he had asked why it was in a bad mood, the drake drunkenly cried, tearing up like a sentimental schoolgirl, which left the boy bewildered. It seemed the drake was upset because its nest was in a terrible location, much harsher than the other nests, and yet its mate said she felt at peace and, well, this guy was bawling his eyes out over his girlfriend. Meanwhile, Ian was wondering how the hell this ugly drake even got a girlfriend when he couldn't even get one. The creature, drowning in sorrow, expressed how its mate had eventually started getting teased by others. That made it feel guilty on her behalf, and in a fit of anger, this guy broke up with his own girlfriend. Ridiculously, this brute's roar woke Nick and the others from their sleep in a comical fashion and then sent them scrambling back to bed when he scared the living daylights out of them. Well, Ian could relate to this feeling. The drake was experiencing the pain of losing a lover just like a human. At the same time, a plan to turn the situation around popped into his head. He called out to the beast, explaining that he could use magic to fix its shabby nest. The monster was stunned by this offer of help. Ian chimed in and asked for something in return, a very simple favor. The next morning, Ian was taking a walk while Lick was still lost in some ridiculous romantic daydream. Our young man tapped the cowardly clown on the head, getting genuinely ticked off that the old geezer still wouldn't wake up. Ian threatened to break his fingers if he didn't get up immediately. He gave the old man a super intense JoJo-style Giga-Chad look. His glare terrified Lick, making him scream and jolt awake while the rest of the group also fell over, tumbling over him. All this time, Ian had to gather them all onto a cart, because as soon as that dragon roared, every single one of them had passed out on the spot. Kathy thought she'd made a mistake following this bunch. Meanwhile, the others asked if that drake dragon had gone back to its nest yet. They clung to each other for comfort, terrified that the monster would charge out at any moment and slaughter them. Ian reassured them that the dragon was in its nest waiting for him. He had made a deal with the creature to save his friends' lives. Just hearing that was enough to turn this group of clowns into his #1 fans, while Ian wondered if he should have just let them die. Earlier, he had told the monster he would fix its nest for it in exchange for these people's lives. Hearing those words, Lick and the others chanted the great mage's name non-stop to honor him. Our young man had no idea what was going on, because apparently this bunch had mistakenly believed that the mage had actually beaten the pulp out of that massive evil dragon for their sake, and after scolding the creature, he had sent it back to its nest after forcing it to surrender before his mercy. This pathetic group was ecstatic, with a wave of emotion welling up inside them. They wanted to serve this man for the rest of their lives. Ian just found it annoying and ordered them to get ready to leave, telling them not to abandon him when he returned. They agreed to this command, expressing that they were a united group. Right after that, Lick told them to check the number of mercenaries they had. Kathy noticed this, and for some reason, she was very cautiously observing her surroundings. Cut to the scene where the dragon takes our young man back to its nest. It was a small, rocky place. Ian looked astonished. This annoyed the dragon because he was acting as if the situation was hopeless. He quickly clarified that it wasn't impossible to fix. It's just that he was sleepy, and his stamina was at an all-time low. Ian just wanted to get things over with quickly so he wouldn't be bothered by it later. His goal was simply to push back the protruding rocks and create more space here. Focusing his mind, he communicated with the silent earth elemental, and it began to respond. The human Ian asked for a favor, but the earth elemental immediately refused, saying it was busy. He realized that this entity was completely displeased with him. Meanwhile, the dragon was anxiously waiting for the results. The mage explained that the earth elemental wouldn't even listen to him, so he would try again when it was in a better mood. He knew the earth elemental would get even angrier if he asked a second time, while the dragon figured that if that's how it was, then there was nothing to be done. Instead of getting angry at the mage, the dragon thanked Ian for genuinely trying to help a pathetic creature like itself. Even our boy was moved when the dragon asked for his name. Ian introduced himself, so the beast also introduced itself. Its name was Long Xiao. It wanted the two of them to be friends, so he took its leg, forging a new bond and confirming the condition for summoning this beast. The system assured him that he could use this monster whenever he wanted, but even so, he still felt bad that he couldn't do anything to help his friend. The beast called the human back, expressing that they should at least celebrate this friendship, and so it wanted to give him as much gold as he liked. It was insane that this creature had so much treasure, and it was willing to give it all to a human. Ian inspected one of the gems, clicking his tongue in regret, thinking that if only the earth elemental had given him a chance, things would have been different. But then, while inspecting one of the gems, our boy was suddenly stunned. He turned to Long Xiao and asked if he could scribble on the floor. The beast was confused, but still agreed to let him. A moment later, Ian had carved a magnificent magic circle with the gem acting as its core. This was a method his master had taught him, a method using a circle of magic to persuade a mystical entity. Long Xiao didn't understand what this mage was planning, while our boy assured it that this would be great. This time, he called upon the earth elemental once more, urging it to move the rocks and flatten the walls for him. Interestingly, the gem in the circle emitted a brilliant light, and sure enough, the walls began to move according to the mage's will. Long Xiao was blinded by the light, but when it looked at its nest again, it had been carved beautifully into a divine masterpiece. Ian expressed that it was a return gift from a friend, while this little dragon was ready to burst into tears. The cave looked badass, and it even smelled great. Long Xiao wondered if this was the beauty of magic too. Then it grabbed the human's hand. This time, the dragon would no longer hesitate to show off its new cave to its girlfriend, and even their future children would feel safe. Ian hadn't asked for any of that information, but he was glad he could help, except the backlash from the spell was hitting him. His body trembled, a sudden headache struck, and before he could understand what was happening, the mage quickly passed out in front of the dragon after a nosebleed. In other words, our boy had fried his own brain for this spell, and he doesn't even have a reverse cursed technique to heal his own brain like Gojo Satoru. Panicked, the dragon comforted its friend who was still panting heavily. The beast didn't know what to do when suddenly Kathy shouted her friend's name and rushed straight toward him. The dragon was a little confused while she was absolutely terrified. Thinking it was about to eat her, she froze in place when the dragon glared at her, thinking she might be some kind of enemy. Kathy trembled and softened her tone, expressing that she came to talk. She started making the same silly hand signs our boy did earlier to prove she was a friend. With much difficulty, the beast finally understood her. They both looked over at Ian, who was still in pretty bad shape and struggling to hang on. As night fell, our boy was brought out under the night sky. When he woke up, he instinctively reached for his phone as if he were still on Earth. Funnily enough, instead of his phone, the guy grabbed this girl's hand before wondering, what the hell? How did my phone get so squishy or turn into a gummy candy? That soft feeling really didn't make any sense until Kathy bluntly asked if he was awake. Because this guy was doing something extremely sketchy. And now, flustered and embarrassed, Ian jumped off her lap, having no clue what the hell she was doing here. At first, he thought he was dreaming, but she explained that she had been shielding him after he hit his head. The pounding headache still tormented him, while she advised him to try and rest. You see, Ian had only just pieced together the fact that he had fainted instantly, and throughout the night he had forced certain evolutionary processes without letting himself adapt. Kathy looked at him confused while he wondered if she had happened to hear everything. The young man was genuinely embarrassed and covered his flustered face with his hands. The question about Long Tiu came up, but it seemed the oversized lizard had already left. It made our boy wonder if he was off chasing his girl. He apologized to Kathy for causing her trouble and asked how the hell she managed to get here with Long Tiu on guard. She explained that somehow she had found a way to communicate, telling it they were friends. He found it hard to believe and wondered if she had used a sorcerer's language. He was quite sleepy and didn't have all the answers, while Kathy shared that she was willing to follow him despite knowing the risks. Actually, it was because she had a favor to ask of this sorcerer. First, Kathy felt guilty about last night's attack because she was the one who caused it. Ian showed surprise, and she immediately apologized for getting them into so much trouble. Our boy understood that things had become unstable and tense so quickly, which made him realize why she had been trembling so violently. Ian hypothesized that she must have some grudge against the bandits. Meanwhile, she felt insulted by the suggestion. The guy even bluntly told her she had the face of a bandit, but Kathy decided to let her guard down to reveal a shocking secret. Ian was certain this was going to be some lame plot twist, something like she's the princess of some kingdom. In fact, she revealed the bombshell that her real name is Lucy of the House Tarian. She's a noble. The bandits had been sent by her fiancé. Ian immediately suspected this might be a squabble between some childish, impulsive lovers as usual. Kathy was annoyed by his silly assumptions. She shared that she intended to disappear to get far away from her fiancé's control. However, she had lost the confidence to run away after what happened yesterday. Grasping his hand tightly, she begged him to help her escape. Ian was a bit overwhelmed by her suddenness, wondering what on earth she was running from, or if things were really that bad. The girl insisted that her family is a barony that rules the Philep region. It's just that due to a lack of knights to protect them, they were always at risk of being attacked at any moment. Because of this, a war for territory was always looming, directly threatening their family's very existence. In a moment of crisis, she was hastily married off to a knight. He was a former mercenary captain, a solution to turn the tide thanks to this man's immense influence in the mercenary guild at the time. All threats against her family vanished. At first, everything seemed fine. The guy appeared content with his position as the son-in-law of House Tarian, but then everything quickly fell apart. He went mad with a lust for power, deluded into thinking he could do anything. This guy even brought all sorts of women home. He treated her with extreme hatred and contempt. Things got so bad that her parents had to request an annulment. But things didn't end well for them. With a heavy heart, she revealed how that bastard had poisoned her parents. Ian was stunned by this truth, while the helpless young woman recounted how that scumbag, afraid of losing power, had ruthlessly poisoned her family to make an example of them. Our boy had to agree this guy was a once-in-a-millennium piece of scum. Lucy explained that since he would always be a commoner, he tried to use force to seize her family's name and title. She managed to escape thanks to the help of a servant. She adamantly refuses to marry him, but she knows he won't let her go. The only desire of a helpless young girl with nowhere to turn is for Ian to take her to safety away from him. Our sorcerer understood her situation all too well. He could sense the brutal nature of someone who would stop at nothing, to the point of being willing to kidnap his own fiancée. This was a complicated issue. Even though he didn't know how these medieval rules affected him, he still sympathized with her. Lucy begged him in the name of her family, imploring him and promising to repay him with anything. However, one question still troubled our boy: why him? Because he could also betray her at any moment. Lucy replied that she had no other choice, because nothing could be worse than that man. She was even willing to trade everything for her freedom. This girl was even desperate enough to be willing to helping you obtain a noble title by becoming a member of the Tarian family, despite a later offer from a young princess who said she would marry a commoner. And for a peasant boy like you, it truly is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a farmer's son to have a connection with the nobility in this world, but Ian still couldn't decide for himself what he truly wanted. If that happened, he would become a noble, but he would no longer be Eldis's disciple, nor could he live the life of a mage in the way he had always wished. Perhaps that kind of life wouldn't be so bad for him. On the other hand, it was also a good path for him to live as a noble immersed in the world of politics and power. Right now, he was standing at a fateful crossroads, asking himself what kind of person he truly wanted to become, a noble or continue on the path of a mage. Even so, he was born into this fantasy world for a reason, so he believed he had to seize this opportunity to push his own magic to its absolute limits. By helping Lucy, he not only gained more experience as a mage, but also earned enough money to cover his living expenses stably. For that very reason, he decided that from now on he would drive away all the kidnappers and let nature take its course. He cleared his throat and told Kathy that perhaps she should ask someone who was better with a sword than him, because after all, a mage isn't exactly a warrior. He couldn't be of much help to her in dangerous moments. Despite that, he still agreed to help, as long as she was willing to pay his fee. And after that, everything that happened would depend entirely on him. Kathy immediately burst into tears of happiness and was incredibly grateful for his help. She threw her arms around Ian. A wave of compassion washed over him. He stood quietly and let her cry her heart out on his shoulder. Meanwhile, Drake was lazing about sunbathing when Ian and Kathy finally stepped out of his cave. Drake immediately became excited upon seeing his friend again. He happily praised Ian's appearance. Ian replied that they were preparing to go down the mountain, because everyone was waiting below. Hearing this, Drake told them both to just climb onto his back, and he would personally take them down. Ian leaped onto his back without a moment's hesitation, but Kathy was still nervous and fidgety for a moment. Drake then called her Ian's girlfriend and told her to climb on too, but Kathy completely misunderstood his meaning and immediately trembled with embarrassment, while Ian hurriedly explained that it wasn't like that, and that they didn't know each other at all. Drake still seemed unconvinced because in his eyes they really looked like an adorable couple. Kathy was still flustered by the situation, but Ian tried to calm her down and told her to just climb on and sit behind him. Seeing Ian's figure at that moment looking just like a true hero, she finally decided to put her trust in him. She climbed onto Drake's back and wrapped her arms tightly around Ian. At the same time, the merchants were arguing loudly with each other while talking to Lincoln. A few insisted on packing their things and leaving immediately, because they believed the dragon had surely eaten Ian, and staying any longer would only bring disaster upon them. However, the group of merchants was split into two factions, constantly bickering about completely opposite courses of action. One side wanted to stay and wait for the powerful mage, while the other was desperate to leave immediately to find a safe place. Nick thought in silence for a moment before opening his eyes and declaring that he had promised Ian he would wait for him, and because of that promise, he decided he would stay no matter the cost. The merchant who supported this decision immediately shouted with joy upon learning they would be staying. However, just 10 minutes later, a group of mountain bandits suddenly attacked them. The bandits captured everyone and aggressively interrogated them about the whereabouts of the girl who was with them. Nick asked in confusion, "What girl?" But one of the bandits explained that they were looking for a beautiful young woman with dark blue hair, while warning Lick that playing dumb wouldn't save him. Lick suddenly realized they were talking about Kathy, but when everyone turned around, they discovered she had vanished from there at some point. The bandits immediately assumed they were all lying and began threatening to kill everyone, causing the merchants to scream in terror. Then suddenly Lick realized that their protector and savior Ian had returned. Everyone hurriedly turned and saw Drake charging toward them at a terrifying speed, carrying Ian and Kathy on his back. A trembling bandit asked if the woman riding that monster was their target. But panic had already begun to spread because the creature was rushing towards them with incredible speed. As soon as they realized it wasn't a dragon but a drake, they immediately dropped everything to run for their lives. After the bandits disappeared, Lick was immensely grateful that Kathy was still safe and sound. Even so, he was also furious because without Ian, she would have certainly fallen into extreme danger with the bandits and those who were hunting her. A merchant wondered how they knew Kathy's whereabouts in the first place, but that mystery had to be set aside for now because no one understood how her pursuers could have tracked her down so soon after they arrived. They also couldn't understand why people who worship the same god could be so cruel. Hearing the name of the church, Ian paused for a beat because it had been a long time since he'd heard anyone mention it. Even so, he knew it was one of the largest religions in the world, and its doctrine strictly forbade the enslavement of its followers. And yet, human traffickers and criminals had ignored those teachings for years to continue trafficking and exploiting people. More importantly, despite witnessing a mage and a drake with their own eyes, those bandits still wouldn't give up on hunting Lucy. Ian realized he was dealing with desperate and stubborn people who would do anything for money, and that thought made him uneasy because at this rate, they would definitely find Lucy. That prospect frightened him because he knew he couldn't handle such a large number of enemies at once by himself. Therefore, he had no choice but to ask Drake for a hand, and he immediately agreed without any hesitation. Ian told him to chase away the men from before, and if necessary, he could just go ahead and kill them. Drake's eyes glinted with mischief as soon as he heard that, because he was very eager to do anything for his new friend. Without wasting another second model, it rushed off to deal with the pursuers. Ian understood that killing was a terrible thing, but this was a medieval fantasy world where killing and being killed were commonplace. And if he wanted to survive in this world, he had to adapt to it. Suddenly, his head started spinning again from overusing the Moronius language. Kathy immediately rushed to catch him before he collapsed to the ground, urgently begging him not to overdo it. Nick immediately noticed the scene. His eyes glinted mischievously as he started teasing them, asking if the two of them were dating. Both Ian and Kathy looked utterly horrified at the thought. This only made Nick grin even wider soon after. They continued their journey and throughout the trip. Ian kept receiving notifications that Drake had just taken another life. In the end, he received a total of 11 separate notifications. He silently admitted that this magic of automatic reporting was actually very convenient, though, He was also a bit annoyed that he couldn't openly summon Drake in front of others. Suddenly, Drake contacted him telepathically, and proudly announced that it had driven off all the suspicious individuals it found. Ian sincerely thanked it for protecting them, but Drake simply replied that it did so, only to make its friend happy. Then Drake asked if Ian really had to go, because it hated saying goodbye, although it admitted they had to part ways for now. Ian understood that Drake couldn't leave the mountain range, and that saddened him, because they might not see each other again for a long time. Drake thanked him once more for everything he had done, but before ending their conversation, it suddenly mentioned the mystery of the Phoenix. Naturally, Ian was immediately intrigued. They finally arrived at Riverview, and Ian couldn't stop thinking about what Drake had said about the Phoenix. Rumor had it that an ice phoenix lived somewhere in the northern mountains, and Ian felt an intense desire to see it with his own eyes. According to legend, phoenixes were creatures that never truly disappeared after death, and possessed the ability to transform through all elements including fire, ice, and even stone. It was known as a monster with extraordinary adaptability to any environment, and Ian silently wondered if there was some way he could create one himself. Upon reaching the gates, Lick and the merchants announced their intention to meet the town's lord and asked if Ian and Kathy wanted to come along. Ian immediately refused. Since Kathy wanted to escape safely, staying away from powerful nobles and high-ranking officials was probably the wisest choice. Therefore, he said the two of them planned to rest at an inn before continuing their journey. Immediately, the merchants started teasing Ian and Kathy again, and this time, Kathy playfully went along with it, complaining that she was exhausted too. She even clung to Ian so naturally that Lick immediately started shipping them again, his face practically flushing with excitement. After separating from the merchants, Kathy admitted that pretending to be with Ian made things much easier as it helped her avoid annoying pests. Although Ian wasn't too fond of this arrangement, he asked why she was so polite to commoners when he himself was just a farmer's son. Kathy honestly replied that she greatly admired him now, so there was no reason to treat him poorly. Ian mulled over her words for a moment and then realized he also wanted to remain friendly and kind no matter what happened, while Kathy silently admired Ian's natural courtesy and wished she could be like him. Ian then asked about her next plan, and Kathy explained she intended to find Count Katina. Apparently, the Count was her maternal uncle, and she was sure that if she told him everything, he would definitely help her. Ian immediately asked if the two of them were close, and Kathy admitted they weren't exactly distant. Even so, Ian couldn't help but be suspicious, pointing out that she shouldn't blindly trust an uncle who wasn't even very close to his own sister. Kathy immediately felt offended and snapped, asking how Ian could possibly doubt her uncle, insisting that there was nothing in this world he wouldn't do for her. Ian finally relented, figuring that if she trusted him that much, then she was probably right. The moment he agreed, Kathy suddenly switched to a teasing tone, joking that if an outstanding mage like Ian proposed to her, she would happily marry him and go see the Count as his wife. Ian immediately shut that idea down, reminding her that their agreement would end the moment they both arrived safely at the Count's. Kathy pouted and called him cruel for rejecting a noble lady willing to marry him, but Ian calmly replied that there were plenty of other women in the world besides her. Kathy was immediately annoyed by that answer and stormed off towards the inn. When they finally arrived at the inn, Ian handed a bag of gold to the receptionist to pay for a room and bathing fees for the night. The amount was more than enough for both of them. The receptionist casually asked if the young lady wanted to bathe as well, but the moment Kathy heard that question, she panicked and hastily insisted it was fine if she didn't bathe. At first, Ian thought she simply hated bathing and figured she was dirty enough to really need one. But a moment later, he realized the truth. The public bathhouses in this medieval world were completely open, and Kathy was clearly uncomfortable with bathing naked in front of strangers. Understanding her hesitation, Ian told the receptionist that only he would be using the bathhouse. Kathy immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, while this conversation was happening, 3 suspicious men sitting nearby had been silently watching Kathy the whole time. Ian noticed their stares instantly, and immediately went on guard. He quickly told Kathy to pull her cloak tighter because someone was staring at her, and he did the same to avoid drawing any more attention. But by then it was too late because the strangers had clearly taken notice of Kathy and had no intention of forgetting her face. Meanwhile, the men staring at Kathy began to have vile thoughts about her. It was the first time they had ever seen someone so beautiful, and to them she looked just like an angel on earth. What irritated them even more was that she was with a scrawny black-haired kid like Ian, and in their minds, someone like him was unworthy of being with a woman like her. They exchanged cunning glances and quickly concluded that since Ian and Kathy clearly weren't planning on staying at the inn for long, they had to act. immediately if they wanted any chance of taking her. Their intentions were vile from the start, and they decided today was their only chance to make a move while they continued to plot and scheme. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the castle, Lord Riverview was speaking with Lick. During their conversation, Lick suddenly realized this was a golden opportunity to get on the Lord's good side, and perhaps secure a safe place to stay right within the castle itself. For that reason, he began to flatter the Lord, profusely praising him until the man looked utterly satisfied and arrogant from all the adulation. When he felt the time was right, Lick finally revealed that, on their journey, they had met a mage. He excitedly explained everything from how the mage managed to tame a dragon to how he had saved all of them from a terrible disaster. Lick even revealed that this mage was currently staying at an inn right in town. The very moment the Lord heard this, his expression completely changed. Instead of excitement, he felt utter terror. He imagined the catastrophic scene that would unfold if an unpredictable mage like that suddenly flew into a rage and unleashed a dragon to ravage his domain. Not only would his people suffer, but the situation was already dangerous enough, because another troublesome force was also stationed in Riverview. That force was the Holy Knights of Santiago, an order of fanatical knights who had dedicated their entire lives to serving God. They fought as both monks and warriors, wandering far and wide to hunt demons and monsters instead of participating in conventional wars. They proudly called themselves the protectors of humanity, but the Lord secretly considered them to be a bunch of self-righteous zealots who spread chaos wherever they went. The mere thought of those Santiago knights clashing with a dragon-riding mage terrified him, because he was certain that if a conflict broke out between the two sides, his peaceful little town would be completely destroyed. Determined to prevent that disaster at all costs, he immediately ordered his commanders to prepare a room for Lick and then sent them to summon the Knights of Santiago at once so he could keep the two parties separated before anything terrible could happen. Meanwhile, Ian and Kathy were having breakfast together at the inn. After finishing his meal, Ian announced he was going to take a bath and casually told Kathy to head up to the second floor after she was done eating. As soon as she was alone, one of the suspicious men seized the opportunity and quietly followed her. As she walked through the inn, he suddenly approached her and made up a story that the black-haired boy had sent him to escort her to the docks immediately for an emergency. He explained that Ian was bathing and had asked him to get her there as quickly as possible. Kathy, with her gentle nature and already anxious about the surrounding dangers, immediately believed him. Her thoughts immediately jumped to the possibility that the bandits had returned to kidnap her again, so she hurriedly followed the stranger without a shred of doubt. However, when she caught sight of Ian calmly bathing, she instantly realized something was very wrong. Unfortunately, by the time she realized, it was too late, as someone suddenly threw a cloak over her head. Ian immediately detected the commotion, and just as one of the men tried to charge and attack him, he suddenly lost his balance and tumbled over due to Ian's magic. In a flash, Ian realized this situation was completely different from the scheme by Lucy's fiancé. This was something else entirely, and worst of all, Kathy was being kidnapped right before his eyes. Without hesitation, Ian used light magic to create an illusion around himself. He possessed many special abilities and secret arts that he could use, and right now light was the easiest to wield. However, at that very moment, something unexpected happened. Shadows began to creep toward him as if they were alive, almost inviting him to play with them. When Ian opened his eyes, he suddenly realized that the darkness had become his new ally. Instantly, he gathered the surrounding shadows and launched them at the kidnapper's, darkness pouring from his eyes, completely engulfing the men. But before he could continue, he realized their reinforcements were approaching, and he couldn't believe that common criminals would have such organized backup. As he violently interrogated one about where they had taken Kathy, the terrified man confessed that he truly didn't know. Suddenly, Ian felt the cold blade of a sword pressed against his back. A stern voice ordered him to step aside, while another questioned him about the darkness from before, asking if Ian was the one who had controlled it. In that moment, Ian knew exactly who had arrived, because standing behind him were the warriors of the Order of the Holy Knights of Santiago. Ian didn't hesitate to confirm that he was the mage who had summoned the darkness. Even as he spoke, he couldn't stop thinking about the old man standing before him, because the overwhelming killing intent radiating from him was truly staggering. The criminal immediately begged the knights to save his life and promptly fabricated a story that the mage had suddenly tried to kill him for no reason. Ian stared at him in disbelief, unable to comprehend how the man could so calmly turn black into white. The old knight narrowed his eyes and remarked that if Ian was truly a mage, then such murderous intent was completely understandable. Hearing this, Ian immediately felt uneasy, but the old man, continued asserting that all mages were the same, for they possessed a dangerous killing intent, and believed they could do whatever they wanted without facing consequences. Ian was furious at those words, and anger began to boil within him. But before he could give a proper response, the old man spoke with such an air of authority that Ian realized something important about this world. Here, having rude words and an overwhelming presence was often seen as proof of strength and skill. However, another knight suddenly stepped forward and declared that regardless of Ian's abilities, it couldn't justify his use of evil magic. Ian faltered at those words, while the knight explained that covering oneself in darkness was an act of turning one's back on the gods and rejecting the sunlight. According to him, hiding in the darkness was no different from the act of a coward. Ian thought carefully for a moment, then calmly cleared his throat and countered that the laws of the heavens allow both day and night to coexist. He went on to ask them that if the heavens truly belonged only to the light, then why did the night exist? The moment those words left his mouth, the knights fell into a state of profound existential confusion. Their expressions changed rapidly as they tried to ponder his reasoning, and soon enough many of them began to feel strangely drawn to him, for they realized this young mage possessed an intellect far beyond their expectations. Taking advantage of the silence, Ian politely asked for their permission to leave, as his younger sister had just been kidnapped, and he was extremely anxious to go save her. Immediately, the knights realized the criminal had been deceiving them all along, and they all turned to look at the liar with eyes blazing with indignation. The old knight then ordered a man named Dichik to watch over the criminal before personally heading towards the inn as a way of apologizing for having wasted Ian's precious time. He declared that he would personally help rescue his sister and ensure her safety right after that. They arrived at the docks where the remaining kidnappers were stealthily trying to take Kathy away on a boat. She was tied up tightly in a body bag while they hastily tried to find a way to escape before being caught. The knights immediately realized what was happening and became absolutely furious that the criminals were about to escape. Meanwhile, Ian noticed an important detail about the time the sun was beginning to set, and because of that, he realized he could use his magic much more effectively at this time. The old Knee asked what everyone should do and insisted that to save that innocent little girl, they had to work together. The knights seemed excited at the thought of a fight, but Ian quickly warned them that charging straight onto the boat could be extremely dangerous. The old man refused to back down and insisted he was willing to do whatever it took to save the girl. Then Ian explained that he had noticed a large hook nearby, and he planned to use it somehow to pull the boat to shore. The old knight looked at him confused and asked if he intended to use his shadow magic for that, because he couldn't understand how that would be effective. Ian casually explained that he had a rudimentary knowledge of various different schools of magic, and that he could use a variety of magic types instead of specializing in just one. The old knight became even more bewildered because in his entire life he had only seen people dedicate their lives to mastering a single element, not multiple elements at once. Without wasting any more time, Ian suddenly began to chant in his infamous Moronius language, and called upon the river itself, asking it to create an obstacle and force the boat back towards the shore. Immediately, the river responded to his command. Rushing currents began to swirl violently, pulling the boat backward, while relentless waves crashed down, battering the ship in the chaos. Thanks to that sudden change, Ian finally managed to rescue Kathy safely. The moment she was freed, she threw her arms around him in immense relief. Ian immediately realized that if she kept acting so intimately, the old knight would quickly figure out they definitely weren't actual siblings. So he had no choice but to awkwardly hug her back, silently lamenting how exhausted he was. His energy was at an alarmingly low level, and all he wanted now was to go back to the inn and soak in a peaceful bath. Unfortunately, Ian didn't yet know that in this world, something as simple as enjoying a quiet bath was nearly impossible for him. Meanwhile, at the castle, an urgent letter had suddenly arrived. It turned out that Bernard, the eldest son of Lord Riverview, along with Hansen, a knight of Riverview, were hurrying towards Ian's location. Both Bernard and Hansen saw thick smoke rising in the distance and immediately assumed it must be from a battle. They then feared that the Lord's worries might have come true and that the knights and the mage had started a large-scale conflict in the region. Hansen thought to himself that this whole situation was troublesome enough already, because he'd been reluctantly dragging along this Silver Spoon young master the whole time. And after seeing the expression on Bernard's face, he became even more certain that bringing him here was a bad idea. He was exhausted from constantly having to baby-sit a spoiled child like him. However, when they finally reached the source of the smoke, they discovered it wasn't from a battle at all. Instead, the knights were actually attending to Ian as he bathed outdoors. a situation that made Ian himself feel extremely uncomfortable and stressed. Bernard and Hansen rushed onto the scene, and Hansen quickly told the young master to stay put. The moment they realized nothing dangerous was happening and that it was literally just a bath, both of them stood frozen to the spot, completely speechless. Neither of them could understand how someone could so casually bathe out in the open like this. Even so, Bernard remained suspicious and deluded himself into thinking that there must be some deeper meaning hidden behind this. He began to look around frantically, searching for any hidden meaning or secret behind the situation. However, he started yelling that as the son of the Lord. The man from Riverview insisted he had every right to a detailed explanation of everything happening here. And when he demanded someone report to him, he immediately threw a childish tantrum while Ian watched the whole scene with an increasingly annoyed expression. The old engineer named Elder calmly said he would explain the situation, but Bernard arrogantly cut him off and snapped that he hadn't asked Elder anything because he wanted Ian himself to answer. His jab at Elder was also obvious. He then smugly introduced himself as the heir to the family before insolently ordering Ian to get out of the bathtub and show proper respect. Looking at him, Ian immediately realized that this behavior was very similar to something Kathy had once told him about. In this world, the nobility apparently had a strange tradition called mage-provoking. It was a custom where nobles would deliberately antagonize bays to test their power and temperament. If a mage silently endured the insults, they would be considered weak. But if the mage reacted violently with anger, they would be acknowledged as truly powerful. Realizing that Bernard was very likely trying to provoke him, Ian refused to comply with his demands. Bernard immediately erupted in another fit of rage, screaming about how Ian dared to defy a noble like him. Ian calmly replied that he had no obligation to listen to a spoiled brat. Unspeakably furious, Bernard ordered his knight to seize the mage at once, although the knight himself seemed more interested in trying to placate the boy than in actually attacking Ian. At that point, Ian decided that was enough. He admitted to himself that he could tolerate the childish provocation from before, but being treated like a con man was completely over the line. Getting up from the bathtub, he unleashed both dark and light magic, simultaneously causing the trash cans, axes, and other surrounding objects to float menacingly in the air. Around him, Hansen hurriedly tried to de-escalate the situation by apologizing for his young master's disrespect and assuring Ian that they now fully understood his power. Ian finally relaxed a bit, believing this display was enough to make Bernard back down. Unfortunately, he was completely mistaken because that little punk immediately flew into another rage. This time, Ian truly began to fear that the spoiled noble might actually try to have him executed, leaving him no other choice but to cooperate for the time being. The next day, Ian visited the castle where Lord Riverview himself had tea with him and apologized for the trouble his son's behavior had caused. Ian politely replied that he was the one who should apologize, as he himself might have gone too far. The Lord asked if Ian had come with his companion, but Ian explained that she currently had other matters to attend to and was staying at the inn. In reality, he knew Kathy was under the knight's protection for her own safety. The conversation quickly turned to Ian's origins, and the Lord asked for his master's name. Ian replied that his master was Sir Elodit, and Lord Riverview immediately recognized the name. He explained that Elodit was known as one of the rising stars of the Academy. Curious, he asked if Ian's master had ever mentioned the South, where the Magic Academy itself was located. Their discussion then shifted to politics, with the Lord asking if Ian planned to travel to the Duchy of Panga or the Duchy of Roslin. Ian admitted he didn't even know where those places were. This led the Lord to explain that tensions between the two territories had been growing more dangerous lately. Apparently, the Duchy of Panga had begun to set its sights on Joplin, and Ian quickly realized this. Could mean war would soon break out between the nations. The Lord then asked if Ian himself planned to head south, but Ian explained that he was actually heading east as he was searching for a certain mystery. Hearing this, the Lord decided to give him a gift. Ian was confused when a chest was suddenly placed in front of him. The Lord encouraged him to open it, and when he did, Ian discovered a staff inside. The Lord explained that this staff once belonged to a renowned wind mage and was called Wingit. Ian carefully lifted it and immediately realized it seemed perfect for him. Although it looked like an ordinary staff on the outside when he held it, it gave him a strange feeling, like he had finally obtained the perfect treasure for a true mage. Even so, he truly treasured this gift. The Lord explained that this should be seen as a gift of apology, an apology for condoning his son's reckless behavior. Ian sincerely thanked him and happily accepted the gift. However, the moment he returned from the meeting, he suddenly heard someone desperately shouting his name. Ian immediately became alert as a frantic Kathy rushed toward him and announced that something terrible had happened. She then showed him a black crow she was holding. Seeing it was just a crow, Ian finally calmed down and Kathy smiled in relief. The old man explained that a hunter had caught the bird early in the morning and was planning to cook it, but Kathy stopped him and took the crow away before he could do anything. Ian realized Kathy was completely serious when she explained that to her. This bird reminded her of Ian because they both had black hair. For some reason, she felt like fate itself had brought the crow to them so she could never allow someone to eat a crow like that. Kathy was practically glowing with excitement while Ian apologized to the old man for all the trouble she had caused, then casually told them to just go ahead and cook it. Hearing this left Kathy completely devastated. She couldn't believe he could be so cold toward such a helpless creature, as Ian tried to calm her down. The knights were delighted at the thought of getting an easy lunch from the bird. Then suddenly Ian heard a voice begging him to save it. He immediately told the others to stop for a moment before carefully picking up the crow, only to realize the creature was desperately pleading for help. Ian began to talk to the crow, and quickly realized that although the bird couldn't understand his words, he could perfectly understand what it was saying. He realized the Moronius language wasn't working properly here. Perhaps it was because this creature didn't have enough mystery for the magic to fully connect. He tried to focus harder, but the crow just kept panicking and repeating the same words over and over until Ian finally lost his temper and angrily told it to shut up since he was going to save it anyway and didn't need to hear the same desperate plea 100 more times. The crow immediately fell silent, and Ian thought to himself that even if the crow didn't fully understand his language, it certainly knew how to read the room and keep quiet. The knights stared at him in disbelief as this mage was calmly talking to a crow, as if it were a person. Ian explained that the crow was begging him for help, and Kathy became ecstatic that her beloved crow would now survive. She beamed and said she knew from the start that this bird was special. Elder remarked that the young lady seemed to have an ability to sense mysteries just like Ian. Kathy grew even happier hearing herself compared to him. Afterwards, Ian carefully healed the crow's broken wing, and Kathy cheerfully said that the wound would heal quickly now. Then she asked what they were going to do with the bird, because if they simply gave it back to the hunters, it would end up being eaten anyway, and saving it would have been meaningless. Ian pondered for a moment while looking into the crow's eyes, and the crow once again pleaded with him not to abandon it because the humans around here were terrifying. Even though Ian found this creature unbelievably annoying, he still sighed and placed it on his shoulder. Kathy immediately asked if they were really going to take it with them, and Ian replied yes, at least until its wing was fully healed. Kathy lit up with excitement and insisted they needed to give it a proper name. She offered a few suggestions, but Ian didn't like any of them. Finally, he decided on the name Oberon. Kathy immediately loved it, and from that moment on, the crow was called Oberon. The bird proudly declared that they could now bask in the honor of serving it, and Ian immediately thought this crow was getting way too cheeky. Kathy then suggested that perhaps they should continue traveling with the knights, as she realized it would be much safer than the two of them wandering around alone. Ian carefully considered what she said and realized she had a point, since ordinary bandits would never dare to attack a group protected by the Santiago Knights. Even so, he wondered if it would be of any use if the knights weren't headed in the same direction as them. Before he could think further, Elder approached and asked why the two of them looked so worried. As he sat down beside them, he explained that no matter how magically talented Ian was, traveling alone with a woman was still extremely dangerous. For that reason, he proposed a deal concerning a dangerous monster that had recently appeared in Count Katina's territory. Elder explained that on their way there, the knights were planning to hunt a creature known as a manticore, a brutal magical beast notorious for slaughtering humans just for fun. Surprisingly, Ian already knew the name and asked if Elder really expected him to help deal with something so dangerous. Elder quickly explained that they didn't actually want to force him to fight and would never drag him into danger against his will. However, if Ian voluntarily wanted to help, no one would stop him. Ian immediately refused, as he had no intention of risking his life to confront such a terrifying monster. However, Elder quickly stopped him and clarified that the real reason they needed him was something else entirely. He explained that when the knightly order announced their intention to hunt the manticore, a priest from Count Katina's territory practically forced a local mage to cooperate with them. Naturally, that mage felt deeply insulted by this treatment. And now the knights want Ian to step in and mediate things because Ian is also a mage, and the Elder believes his words would carry much more weight than anything the knights could say. Ian carefully considers the offer and realizes it's not actually a bad deal. If all he has to do is calm down an angry mage in exchange, they would get the protection and escort of an entire order of knights. This could be extremely useful for both him and Kathy, so he ultimately accepts the offer. Soon after, They continue their journey together, and Ian quickly realizes that traveling with the Santiago Knights is surprisingly comfortable. The members of the knightly order are disciplined, people with firm principles, and compared to the chaos he usually experiences, the trip is almost stress-free. However, if there was one complaint, it would be that nearly every knight constantly tries to convert both him and Kathy to their religion. At first, the conversations were bearable, but it wasn't long before the endless sermons became repetitive, tiresome, and irritating, as Ian had no interest in abandoning his beliefs just because someone kept insisting. Later that night at the campsite, the elder quietly sits beside him and comments that it's a shame. Ian immediately asks what he means by that. The elder explains that if only Ian could hear the voice of God, then perhaps he could become a cleric for the knightly order. He explains that clerics are essentially the mages of the church, those who hold the mysteries of the faith itself. If he could actually speak with God, maybe he could finally ask about his strange status board and why he was reincarnated into this world. Curious, he approaches Dietrich and asks if he could also study their holy book. After a moment, Dietrich patiently teaches Ian how to read passages from the scripture and even praises him for being open to their faith. However, Ian suddenly loses interest. Dietrich notices the strange change in his expression and asks what's wrong. Ian replies that Dietrich had just praised him a moment ago, but Dietrich immediately panics and insists that he hadn't said a thing. Confused, Ian swears he clearly heard a voice, speaking directly to him. That's when he suddenly realizes the voice didn't sound human at all. Then another strange voice whispers in his ear, calmly suggesting that perhaps the one speaking was never a being that could be called human, and Ian is completely bewildered, not understanding what's happening to him. He realizes that the voice echoing in his head might be the very one who brought him here, so he immediately yells out, demanding an answer. He relentlessly presses the supposed creator with questions about the status board and why he was thrown into this world right after he had just graduated. As his anger escalates, a sudden gust of wind blows past, and just like that, it seems the mysterious creator has left without a reply. Our boy becomes furious and starts throwing a fit, demanding that she come back and answer him properly. Meanwhile, the Santiago Knights struggle to hold him back as they nearly beg him to calm down. A moment later, an idea strikes Ian, and he quickly flips through the holy book, hoping it might give him a second chance to contact that voice. As he continues to read, the status board suddenly appears with a notification stating he has received a new skill called Divine Arts. It says this skill will allow him to communicate with the creator of this world. Right after more and more notifications flood in, telling him to show greater interest if he wants to please the creator. Seeing all this, Ian starts to wonder if the owner of that voice is really the one who dragged him into this world and granted him this ability. The more he thinks about it, the more he feels like a puppet being manipulated and made a fool of. He wants to push things and confront her directly, but his divine arts level is still too low to start a real conversation. In the end, he gives up for now, deciding he'll have to uncover more mysteries and gather enough points to level up his divine arts. A few days pass on their journey, and at one point a group of bandits tries to ambush them. The knights easily take down the weak amateurs without any trouble. Afterwards, they check on Ian and ask if he's all right. Ian replies that he's safe and asks the old man in return if he's okay, since they were the ones who actually did the fighting. The old man just laughs it off, saying that even if he turns into an old geezer, he would never lose to some amateur mountain bandits. Ian takes the opportunity to ask more about his past and mentions that he heard he used to be a mercenary. The old man admits it, saying that even though he just looks like an old man now, he used to be a big shot that everyone knew. He explains that he had to start using the nickname Elder, because whenever people heard his real name, they would seek him out to start trouble just to gain attention and build a reputation for themselves. Hearing this, Ian starts to wonder if this old man was really that famous. After the bandits are dealt with, one of the knights reports to the old man and informs him that the road ahead splits in two. He explains that the eastern road leads to the Count's castle, while the western road heads toward the Manticore's territory. The old man then tells Ian that the mage he mentioned before lives somewhere near the Manticore area, then points in that direction, telling him to hurry up. Ian tells the group to stop for a moment and suggests to Kathy that they should go see that mage before heading to the Count's place. Lucy immediately refuses and says she'll go alone instead. Ian gets worried and asks if she'll be okay on her own. She smiles and replies that she's not a child and is confident the eastern road will take her straight to her uncle. She waves goodbye and leaves without a hint of hesitation. Watching her leave so casually makes Ian feel uneasy, wondering if she'll really be okay. After that, he decides he'll deal with the mage as quickly as possible so he can check up on her before anything bad happens. The old man asks the boy why his sister left without him, but Ian simply replied that he would catch up to her soon and quickly changed the subject back to the mage. The old man looked over Ian's shoulder and asked if he was mentally prepared to face what was to come. He tried to scare him by explaining just how dangerous mages could be, and added that the person they were about to meet was annoyed by the church's request. Ian wondered why the knights had to clean up the church's mess, and the old man casually replied that it was because they were paid a huge amount of money for it. That answer made Ian realize why all the knights wore such shiny, expensive armor. The old man then showed a bit of empathy and reassured him that since Ian was also a mage, the other one might calm down upon seeing his face. Ian began to wonder what kind of person she was. This would be his first time meeting a mage other than his master. Meanwhile, the female mage named Money Campbell, who looked more like a grumpy witch, was stirring a pot of soup. The scene flashes back to an earlier time. The church had approached her and demanded she use her magic to help capture the manticore. They had been rude, telling her she should be grateful the forest was under their control. That attitude infuriated Money, and instead, she offered them a chance to taste her cooking if they wanted her help. She used the disgusting stench from her soup to scare them off, and it worked perfectly. Back in the present, the knights and Ian were approaching the witch's home. The old man informed him that the mage they were about to meet was Money Campbell. He introduced her as a famous plant mage, explaining that she could control plants at will and even had the ability to extract deadly poisons from them. The old man then added that the real reason they were there was to ask for her poison, the very thing they needed to hunt the manticore. Just then, a disgusting smell filled the air, causing the knights to quickly cover their noses in disgust. Money appeared, laughing mockingly yet eerily. She said she had been waiting for them and was delighted they had actually returned to taste her delicious soup. She handed them a foul-smelling garlic chicken soup. It was rancid and looked extremely dangerous. The knights kept their noses covered while reluctantly holding the stinking bowls as the old man tried to explain that they were there, not to test her skills through her cooking. Money replied that her rare meal was made from the finest ingredients which she had harvested herself. She told them they were free to leave if they didn't want to accept her hospitality and taste her cooking. While the knights were struggling and even starting to gag from the smell and taste, Ian casually drank the soup in large gulps, finishing one bowl after another without hesitation. It was clear he actually enjoyed the taste so much that he couldn't stop eating. The witch became concerned as she watched him devour her poison-like dish without slowing down at all. When Ian calmly told the female mage, boy, that it was actually delicious, Money couldn't believe what she was hearing. Ian went on to mention how much he liked the amount of garlic she had put in the soup, and continued eating without a care. Money and the knights began to feel uneasy at the sight. She rushed over to him and insisted that was enough. She admitted that in her 45 years as a plant mage, she had never met anyone so strange. She then directly asked for his name. As soon as Ian said it, Money looked visibly startled and hurriedly confirmed if he was indeed the apprentice of the fire mage. Eldit. She immediately apologized for how she had treated him earlier and to save face, quickly prepared a proper lavish meal for him and the knights. Ian still preferred the chicken soup, but he chose to go along with the situation instead of making a fuss. Money then switched to a more serious tone and asked if they intended to hunt the manticore. She warned them it was a dangerous mission, reminding them that the winged beast had already wiped out several hunters sent by Count Karina. The old man replied that he was more than ready for the task. Seeing his confidence, the witch asked if he had ever defeated a manticore before. The old man nodded and said yes, but it was a long time ago when he was young. Then she turned to Ian and asked if he had ever faced one himself, adding that she expected him to be a real mage since he was trained by a legendary fire mage. She went on to ask Ian to lend the knights a hand. Hearing this, our boy was lost in thought. He recalled his master teaching him that a mage should intervene in others' troubles even if it goes against their own wishes, and that such matters must always be taken seriously. Pondering those words, Ian also felt there was no reason for him to go out of his way to hunt a dangerous winged lion. However, the thought of refusing the request and letting rumors spread about him in the Mages Association made him hesitate. The Mages Association was an organization established to maintain the proper use of arcane arts, and Ian didn't want to damage his reputation there. He worried that refusing might anger his master and even cause other mages to deny him help when he needed it. Seeing no other choice, Ian agreed to accompany them on the hunt. The next day, he headed towards the forest with Money and the knights, hoping Kathy would be all right on her own. As he was lost in thought about Kathy, his pet crow, Oberon, He returned and reported that he'd found the winged lion, also pointing out its exact direction. When Ian relayed this to the old master, he was very impressed with how Ian had used crows for reconnaissance. During the journey, Ian tried to help Oberon get used to human language, allowing him to communicate directly with it. As they drew closer, the captain of the Knights, Santiago, began to feel a strange pressure in the air and became more vigilant. Ian asked if the old master could try to persuade the manticore, since it was basically a monster too. The old master didn't know how to answer, while Manny immediately objected. She said that the winged lion wasn't something you could easily reason with. She was a little panicked and asked Ian what he knew about summoning magic warning that she would report him to his master, if he really intended to do it. Ian briefly wondered if he should be getting some praise for his efforts instead of this. Just then a knight pointed in one direction and reported that they had finally encountered the monster. Everyone froze like statues, not daring to move even an inch. Our boy told the others not to move and to stay close to him. Daichik approached the old master and said that the poisoned weapons were ready, handing over several arrows coated in a deadly liquid. The knight commander ordered his men to fire, and a volley of arrows flew past him. Meanwhile, Ian watched the whole situation unfold without saying a word. As the poisoned arrows flew forward, our hero suddenly became alert. The arrows bounced off the monster's skin without leaving even a small scratch. He quickly shared this information with the old master, who was holding his head in despair. While Daichik was asking what they should do next, just as he was about to order another attack, a wicked laugh echoed throughout the area, and the monster finally revealed itself. Poor Oberon looked like it was about to collapse from fear. Ian realized that with the monster right in front of them, there was no more time to prepare poisoned arrows. Seeing no other way, he looked up at the sky and let out a powerful roar in the Maronius language. Everyone fell silent while Manny realized that the kid had actually done it. Even the manticore stopped moving, and the two stood facing each other. The monster was intrigued that a human could speak its language and said that Ian was not like the others. Forcing himself to stay calm, our boy continued in a polite tone and introduced himself. However, the monster immediately cut him off and told him to shut up and go drown in a puddle. Hearing that, Ian dropped the polite act and asked it what the hell it was. The manticore seemed pleased with the blunt response and said, "Now that's more like it." It told the human to just be direct and ask if he wanted to know something. Matching that tone, Ian replied that he wanted the monster's head. The answer made the creature burst out laughing, saying that it liked him already. It then offered a deal to the mage, telling him to join its forces and tear those filthy humans to pieces. The idea shocked Ian, while the manticore kept talking about how it would enjoy the taste of human flesh. It told the boy he could have as many women as he wanted, and after he was done, the manticore would eat them too. The monster started getting excited at the thought, but our boy interrupted it with a disappointed sigh. Spitting on the ground in front of the creature, he said the idea was too disgusting to even consider. Our kid and Oberon both raised their middle fingers and let out a string of curses that would give his mother a heart attack. Daichik tried to speak up, looking visibly tense, but was cut off as the manticore took a fighting stance. Switching to their language, it pointed its claw forward like a spear and declared that Ian was a human worthy of being finished off by it personally. Our hero was even more shocked to see the monster could speak the common tongue and froze in surprise. Manny quickly reacted and stomped her foot on the ground to cast a spell. Trees began to grow rapidly, forming giant vines that rose up like a wall, separating the monster from them. However, the old man didn't calm down, and instead started scolding Manny for her actions. Confused, she said that she had trapped the monster, but the old man reminded her that his men were also stuck in there. She paused for a moment, then argued back that the knights weren't useless and could handle themselves. Suddenly, the old man froze when he heard a scream from the other side of the wall. Worried for his men, he rushed off while the other two shouted for him to stop. A moment later, they arrived, and he immediately asked if everyone was still alive. The atmosphere grew tense as a knight reported that they had survived, but Daichik was severely injured. Lying there in pain, the loyal knight apologized for letting the monster escape, but the knight commander Santiago cut him off and hugged him tightly. Ian felt like he was about to break down and clenched his fists. After being reincarnated, he had never thought he would have to watch someone die right in front of him, especially someone like Daichik. Memories of his past life flashed through his mind as he struggled to accept how real everything here was. He finally understood that in this world, monsters and war were commonplace. The deaths he had once only read about in stories were now happening right before his eyes. Refusing to stand by and do nothing, he adjusted his cloak and walked toward his fallen comrade. Kneeling beside him, he asked if Dichik remembered what he was taught when studying the Holy Scriptures, that if a person truly has faith and prays sincerely, the heavens will open a path. Those words brought tears to the knight's eyes as he nodded yes. Ian then said they should pray together. As a blue light began to spread around them in his mind, he pleaded with the heavens, asking if their loyal follower was dying in despair right before their eyes, and they weren't going to do anything about it. A voice echoed back that his plea had been heard and offered to help because Ian had asked so nicely. The entire area was flooded with blue light. Temporarily blinding everyone, the old man started to call out to him, but fell silent before he could finish his sentence. Meanwhile, our hero let go of his comrade's hand and looked at his own, unsure of what was happening. The scene then shifted to an ethereal space. Glowing brightly, a voice called out to Dichik and told him to wake up. A woman in a white dress reached her hand out to him, much to his surprise. The man realized this must be the Creator, the one he had always been praying to all this time. As she stepped down and stood before him, she said that she was happy to meet him here. Dichik immediately bowed his head, feeling overwhelmed by what was happening. The holy woman told him that his mission in life was not yet over. He looked confused and repeated her words, trying to understand their meaning. However, the holy woman reached out her hand and instructed him to spread her message far and wide and help those in need. Most importantly, she told the loyal knight that he must help her apostle Ian. At that moment, Dichik jolted awake in the real world upon hearing his leader call his name. He sat up and asked what had just happened. Our boy called his name as he approached and asked how it felt to be reborn. The knight immediately burst into tears and tightly gripped Ian's hands. He said that our hero had saved him because the Creator had surely commanded it. Our hero gave a forced smile, recalling that he could only use holy magic because the holy woman had allowed him to borrow her power. He asked how the knight knew that, and explained that the holy woman had told him that. Dichik still had much to do in this world. Remembering the words of the divine being, the knight excitedly shouted and started calling Ian an apostle. The other knights thought that he had probably hit his head on something, and agreed they would have to keep an eye on him for a while. Witnessing this scene, Moni remarked that they seemed quite cheerful for people who had almost died just a few minutes ago. Seeing his subordinate had recovered, the old man asked if they were ready to fight the manticore again. Our hero sent Oberon to scout the area ahead, so they could get a better grasp of the situation. The knight leader grew worried that something bad might happen to the bird, but Ian dismissed his concerns, leaving the man bewildered. The main character told the team that the manticore was no ordinary low-level monster, so they needed to prepare thoroughly to deal with it. The scene then cut to the manticore. It was busy attacking a nearby town, chasing people through the streets. A young man was leading his father away from the monster, but the old man suddenly slipped and fell to the ground. The son cried out, but it was too late as the manticore rushed in for the kill. Before the monster could bite down, the young man grabbed a pitchfork and tried to drive it away from his father. He raised the weapon, though his whole body was trembling violently. The manticore understood that the old man was his father and made an offer. It told him to kill his own father, and in return it would spare the lives of everyone else in the area. The young man refused the offer and told the monster to die. The manticore didn't seem bothered by that answer at all. It raised its claws high, preparing to tear them to shreds. The father and son held each other tightly, ready to accept their deaths, but at that very moment, an arrow flew through the air and sank into the monster's eye. Knight Captain Santiago rushed forward and parried the attack while the manticore roared in pain. The father and son finally had a chance to breathe as the old knight yelled for his soldiers to prepare. The soldiers quickly moved in while the manticore glared at them and roared that they were courting death. However, Ian called out to the monster, calling it an idiot. A master of taunting, he declared that the manticore was only delaying its inevitable defeat. The monster roared at him to shut up, but our hero continued wondering aloud if this was the barking of a defeated dog. The taunt worked and the manticore charged straight toward Ian at full speed. At the last second, our hero smiled as Moni stepped up and raised her scepter. She activated another plant growth spell, tightly binding the monster in vines. The old man then ordered the soldiers to act, and they threw clay pots at the manticore. Now trapped, the beast became even more furious as it was covered in a strange liquid. Meanwhile, Moni told Ian that now was his time to shine. Our boy stepped forward and activated a fire spell with just a snap of his fingers. The manticore realized the liquid was oil, but it was too late, and was immediately engulfed in a sea of flames. Its screams gradually faded while Ian, showing no reaction, mocked his enemy until it was nothing but cinders. After it was all over, the townspeople came forward to express their gratitude to the knights, who calmly stated they were just doing their duty. From behind, our boy shot a cold glare at Knight Captain Santiago, watching the old codger soak up all the praise. Oberon looked at him with innocent and sarcastic eyes, asking why its great master wasn't receiving the respect he deserved. He told the annoying little furball to shut up and then wondered if the display of roasting the manticore alive with fire magic had terrified the people instead of earning their respect. Just then, he was genuinely surprised when a young man and his father approached to thank him for saving their lives. He froze for a moment, not knowing how to react, because he never expected anyone to thank him in the first place. A radiant smile spread across the old knight captain's face as he noticed that reaction. He suddenly bowed his head in gratitude to the mighty mage who had saved everyone from the evil manticore. Ian awkwardly replied that he was just following Moni's orders, so there was no need for him to bow like that. That answer surprised the knight captain, who hadn't expected him to have humility on par with his skill and demeanor. In his experience, kids like him would usually grow up to be heroes whose reputations made them seem even nobler than actual royalty. Right after that, a group of guards approached the knights and asked if they were the ones who had to take down the beast or not, instead of answering directly, "Knight Captain." Santiago demanded those fools identify themselves before the soldiers, who apologized and explained that they were guards from the Count's castle. Our boy was surprised when they were both invited straight to the Count's castle. At the Count's residence, the knights were welcomed with a feast. Befitting their achievement, Lucy's drunk uncle loudly praised their righteous spirit, commending them for fearlessly slaying a beast, as so evil and dangerous. The old man scoffed and nonchalantly declared it was nothing special for warriors of their caliber. His words clearly made the Count a little jealous. Wishing he had bodyguards like them protecting his residence, he ignored the fact that his own guards were standing right there listening. Next, he started sucking up to the sorceress. He promised to do everything in his power to ensure not one clergyman would set foot in her forest ever again. His expression suddenly turned serious as he looked at Ian, mentioning he'd heard quite a lot about him from his niece. The man was stunned to see the kid so absorbed in stuffing his mouth full of meat and bread that he didn't even notice he was being called. It wasn't until his young friend reminded him that the important figure was talking to him that Ian shot a cold glare at the bastard who had interrupted his excellent three-course meal. Gripping a loaf of bread as if it were his, he nonchalantly apologized for being distracted, claiming the food was too delicious to refuse. Hearing this, the Count pretended to overlook his earlier disrespectful attitude. Instead, he praised him for keeping Lucy safe. As a reward, he ordered his butler to open a chest. Inside was a brilliantly glowing magic scroll. Legend has it that powerful spells are inscribed upon these scrolls. They release their stored magical power the moment they are torn. Seeing such a rare item right before his eyes, our protagonist was completely overwhelmed. Holding the fine paper in his hand, he carefully observed the characters inscribed on it. The Count smirked and asked if the gift that he had specially prepared for him was to his liking. Our protagonist expressed his gratitude for this wonderful reward, but the Count replied that it was fully deserved by the hero who brought his dear Lucy back safely. With just a snap of his fingers, the grand banquet hall doors swung open. The noble lady entered in a beautiful dress and a ridiculously long wizard hat that was half her height. That silly hat nearly made our friend choke on his saliva from trying to hold back laughter. As Lucy sat down beside them, he wondered where she had dug up such a funny costume. She shyly met her savior's gaze. Lucy gently asked how he had been. After watching the two of them gaze adoringly at each other for just a second, the knight captain teased him, reminding him that he used to call her Big Sister. Looking at her expression, it seemed she saw him as someone even more special. Getting straight to the point, the Count made an offer to our mage. He wanted Ian to escort Lucy on her mission to get revenge on the bastards who had hurt her. The Count insisted that he join his troops to ensure the mission's success. Our boy quickly realized that the magic scroll wasn't exactly a free reward. It was clearly bait to pressure him into accepting the offer. Even so, a mage's role is just to stand back and cast spells, which isn't too dangerous, so he wasn't completely against the idea. Besides, if things went smoothly, he could earn a hefty sum from Lucy and her uncle. Maintaining a humble attitude, he agreed that if they believed a mage, as lowly as himself, could be of use, he would join them. 3 days later, everyone, including Lucy, gathered outside the Count's residence. Lucy explained that the Count was busy with preparations, but he would hold a grand welcome for them upon their return. Knight Captain Santiago just smiled and said he was looking forward to it. Meanwhile, our kid was annoyed that the formation had lost several talented people, all thanks to the Count shamelessly bribing them with jewels. Just then the old man suddenly thanked him for staying by his side all this time. He promised that a surprise would be waiting for him when he visited Chippa Island. Seeing him confused by the unfamiliar name, the captain explained that it was a floating island in the Coral Sea, and that the locals would give him a warm welcome if he mentioned the name Salvado. Astonished, Ian asked if Salvado was really his name. Realizing it was finally time for the reveal, the old man calmly said that his name was Salvador, and he was from the August family. Before Ian could grasp the significance of that name, Lucy immediately recognized the title Sunvado of the White Wolves. The old man chuckled, humbly amused by his old title, while our boy just stood there, feeling completely left out of the conversation. Realizing he didn't get it, Lucy explained to the fool that he was standing before the former captain of the Emperor's private mercenary corps, the White Wolves. Their leader was so skilled with a sword that it was rumored the Emperor himself had bestowed upon him the title of Sword Saint. This meant they were standing before a living legend. However, Oberon and Ian couldn't care less. Both just stared blankly as if it were no big deal. Shocked by their reaction, Lucy immediately started singing the old man's praises. She wondered why he wasn't freaking out and doing backflips just for breathing the same air as such a prominent figure. On the contrary, Salvador didn't seem too surprised by Ian's bland reaction, as he had more or less expected it. Even so, he was still very amused by everyone crowding around and freaking out after learning his true identity. With that, all the Sword Saint and the little sorceress prepared to depart. One of the knights grabbed our kid's hand, deeply moved, as he asked if they would ever see each other again. Before they left, Salvador shook Ian's hand and promised to see him again on the floating island. The old man then wished him a safe journey until that day came. A little later, the Count stepped onto the platform to address his army. Each step felt heavier as the memory of his niece's plea for revenge for her mother lingered in his mind. He never would have dreamed that Grimm would dare to lay a hand on Lucy after what he did to her mother. He was sure he could turn her into a solid political shield, making his territory much safer. And with that, he'd gain more control over the barony. With that thought, the cunning man decided he would speak to his niece privately when things settled down. Later, the Count gave a powerful morale-boosting speech to the soldiers to put an end to the injustices and crimes that Grimm had committed that night. The knights set up camp, and some of them, including Lucy, were genuinely confused. They wondered if he had hit his head on something along the way. Instead of cooking, he just sat there, boiling his spoon. The lady tried not to judge, wondering if he came from a poor region, where spoons were considered a delicacy. Some knights in the distance started spreading a rumor that the Archmage was a lunatic who drank spoon soup. Annoyed, our boy told Lucy he was just disinfecting the spoon. The big word flew right over her bird brain. He then brushed her off, saying it was too complicated for her to understand anyway. That only made the knights more curious, thinking he was preparing some kind of secret, delicious dish. They ended up annoying him even more when they asked if they could add some meat to his special soup. After dinner, Lucy admitted she'd been thinking about something for a while, but was still a bit hesitant. When he asked what she meant, she reminded him of the reward she had promised earlier. The lady looked completely stumped on what to give him. She said he must be sick of always getting gold coins. The broke-as-a-joke boy was speechless, but he let her continue talking about a reward she believed was truly worthy of someone like him. She recounted a legend that said, the fairies once gifted the first Barantarian a magic sword. It seems the fairy had fallen for him after he saved their kingdom. Lucy was completely engrossed in the story of her ancestor, but Ian wasn't buying that cheap romance story for a second. He retorted, asking why the Tarian family had never been promoted to a rank higher than Baron if they really possessed such a legendary weapon. That question immediately shattered her little fantasy, and she sheepishly admitted that all of this happened hundreds of years ago. Then she added that there was just one teensy-weensy little problem standing between her and the sword. It was buried deep inside the first Baron's tomb, which meant they'd have to go grave robbing to get it. Stunned, our boy could only stare at the crazy girl, who was casually expecting him, a total stranger, to go dig up her own great-great-grandfather's grave. Still, he asked if she was really okay with giving away a priceless family heirloom, because her family could totally use it to bolster their domain's reputation. He tried to convince her that there were better ways to use it, but Lucy just pouted angrily. The grumpy lady explained that he had given her a second chance to fight for what was hers. Her hands trembled, as she said that everything he did had changed her life, so he fully deserved a reward of equal value. She shot up to her feet, both embarrassed and annoyed, that he would take something she had put so much thought into so lightly. Calling him a dense, clueless idiot, she stormed back to her tent in a huff. After hearing all that, the guy with the IQ of a rice cooker realized he should have handled that more delicately. Just then, a red-haired knight called out, asking if he could spare a moment. Elsewhere, a nearby farmer loudly threatened to beat the knights to death if they dared steal his things. The scumbags mocked him, saying they might consider leaving if he handed over a few chickens. One of them poked a finger into the man's chest, loudly declaring that knights marching to war couldn't survive without food to fill their bellies. However, his arrogance vanished the moment he saw a crow land on a nearby branch. He immediately recognized it as the Archmage's pet. Out of nowhere, Oberon started warning them that his master was coming, while the three idiots were still gawking at the talking crow. Our boy casually greeted them from behind. The trembling trio slowly turned around their faces, frozen. They instantly knew they were screwed. Our boy coldly asked what the hell they were doing. You see, he'd had a meeting with the Count before they deployed. The Count's hesitation made him think the request must be something serious. But surprisingly, he simply asked for a favor. He needed him to handle his undisciplined mercenaries who were going around looting from the common folk. Our boy was rather confused, since this sounded more like a job for the knights. The Count let out a long sigh and explained that the knights and mercenaries had grown too close. They were brothers in arms who always covered for each other's crimes. At first, he turned a blind eye because it gave the mercenaries something to do, but now they were getting bolder, brazenly stealing right in his precious niece's domain. He silently judged the uncle who begged him that night to go warn them, hoping it would whip the soldiers back into shape. Now, under his razor-sharp gaze, the three terrified knights huddled together like conjoined twins. He declared it was time for these trash-rummaging stray dogs to pay the price for stealing from their own countrymen. All three of them nearly pissed their pants when our master magician threatened to unsubscribe them from life to make an example of them. By the next morning, news of his warning had spread everywhere. The mercenaries were so scared they didn't even dare step outside. His actions made the Count and his niece overjoyed. They breathed a sigh of relief that the people were finally safe. However, the red-haired knight brought some bad news. He requested to see the Count directly to point out a flaw, highlighting the gravity of their strategy. A soldier bluntly declared that in their current state, they were nothing more than prey for Green's army, much to the surprise of our boy. He questioned if the man truly believed that since Feta had 400 elite soldiers. The knight repeated that they were no longer soldiers. They were just harmless prey. He explained that before. His men used to raid and plunder Grimm's territory. Their constant looting and oppression would force the people to rise up against Grimm. This kept his forces distracted, but ever since they stopped harassing civilians under Ian's pressure, the tables have completely turned. The townspeople are now very peaceful. There are no riots and everything is stable. That means Green can focus all his energy on quietly gathering his forces, putting Feta at a huge disadvantage. In addition, ever since the soldiers were forced into line by the Archmage's punishments, their morale has plummeted. After hearing all this, our protagonist realized they were stuck in a pretty terrible situation. This grim news gave the Count a splitting headache as he tried to rack his brain for a solution. Out of options, he turned to our hero for help. They couldn't afford to lose this war. Otherwise, the usurper would likely take everything this time. With a worried expression, Lucy also turned to look at him with hopeful eyes, even under all that pressure. He remained calm, asserting that the situation wasn't completely hopeless as long as he was here. His reassuring words immediately lifted their spirits, making both the uncle and niece eager to hear what the master had to say. At the same time, the soldiers standing behind the red-haired knight glared at him as if he'd just slapped their mothers. These suspicious men clearly didn't trust his overconfident attitude and looked as if they were plotting something shady. The next morning, our boy went straight to a farmer's house. The farmer started yelling at the visitor and his noisy crow, who were making a constant racket outside his door. The moment the old man opened it, our protagonist aggressively stepped forward, getting right in his face with a soulless gaze that scared him to death. In a steely voice, he demanded to know if this man was the owner of the wheat field. Both confused and annoyed, the farmer retorted, demanding he state his name first. A nearby knight quickly introduced him as the disciple of the Archmage, eldest Sir Ian. That immediately made the farmer's face turn pale as he realized he had just insulted a lord. He immediately dropped to his knees, shoving his fat, disgusting face into the mud while repeatedly begging Sir Ian for forgiveness for his ignorance. With the stage now set, our protagonist smoothly moved on to the next phase of his plan. He declared that this year's harvest was doomed, ignoring the poor farmer who was desperately begging for an explanation. Slamming his staff into the ground, he roared that the curse of the first Baron of the Tarian family had descended upon the old man's wheat field, playing his part perfectly. He lowered his voice and explained that the curse would fall upon any land that was stolen from its rightful owner. Thinking his entire livelihood was about to go up in smoke, the farmer desperately begged for a solution, or at least something he could do. Just then our boy told him to be silent. He suddenly acted as if he had sensed something, and his eyes widened in astonishment, as if he were receiving a divine message from the heavens. Raising his hand dramatically, he declared that the heavens had revealed the only way to break the curse. If the rightful heir Lucitarian becomes the Baron, the wrath of the first Baron will finally be appeased. After delivering that message, he and the knights quickly departed using the excuse that he had just detected another curse nearby. The farmer was so scared he nearly pissed his pants as our boy left, leaving a final warning that the entire land would become barren under the rule of the usurper Green. After repeating this performance a few more times in different places, the rumor of the curse spread like wildfire among the populace. Before long, the people began to protest, demanding that Grimm step down and let Lucy take power. Only then could they escape this so-called curse. At the same time, his genius strategy also boosted the army's flagging morale. However, a few suspicious soldiers in the Fifth Army were not too happy about all of this. Late that night, they brought their complaints straight to the Count. Puzzled by their strange attitude, the Count pressed them on what exactly had gotten them so worked up. The soldiers argued that their brilliant mage had played dirty by spreading rumors about their homeland being cursed. They insisted that it was unacceptable to serve under a mage who would dare to curse his own land. Speechless before these hopeless fools, our boy shot back asking if they were really stupid enough to believe the nonsense he had just made up right in front of them. Those idiots still insisted, retorting that his shady tactics were the very reason they couldn't trust him. In that moment, he realized his plan had backfired. From the moment he told one lie, they began to see everything he said as just another lie. He let out a tired sigh, utterly fed up with the brainless complaints this bunch of clowns kept throwing at him. At the same time, he also understood that the knights were the backbone of the army, so he couldn't just ignore them. Just one look at the Count's troubled expression was enough to know the man knew he had to meet their demands to maintain their trust. Deciding to make it easier for him, our boy took the initiative and stepped forward. If they didn't want an untrustworthy mage by their side, then he had no problem leaving on his own. The knights who were left behind were clearly furious. They never expected him to make a move like that. But then he dealt them another blow, telling them straight up not to come crawling to him for help later, because once he walked away this time, he was never coming back.